spectrum artist, huilo has published 5 books, art films, numerous art installations, experimental theater presentations, is the founder of an arts and ecology center in Central America, owner of Teatro Jaguar Luna, Jaguar Moon Press, Jaguar, and leads an Earth Ark reforestation project in southern Costa Rica.
And we have some stories, and so why are we here tonight? And I think, in reflection, the gist of what's happening tonight is we're going to talk about storytelling, who we are as queer people and other. It's not necessarily not responsive to hetero-oriented people or binary, whatever, is, a lot of what my thinking, and I'm the author of Tales of a Jaguar Magician, which is here. It's centered around a queer creation myth. Many of us grow up in schools that teach pretty much binary hetero mythology. So anybody who's growing up queer-oriented from birth or discovering later on is immediately feeling flawed. Where do I fit into this? Okay, I'm a god and I can change from male to female, but a lot of that information doesn't really come until college level, when you get Hindu myth or Native American myth, or you get Greek myths. So the genesis for these books, this storytelling, was I was at Gay Pride 100 years ago in San Francisco, and I was looking around, I was like, what is wrong with us? First of all, we're so much fucking fun. We're really colorful. We're hell of creative. And I was like, why are we feared? What's wrong? But I turned it inside and I said, what is not happening within our own queer community that we're not projecting stories out to the larger society in a way that we're being accepted? We're being tolerated, which is one aspect. So my invitation tonight through our conversation is to, if you can walk out of here thinking or feeling or questioning, queer youth, queer people, LBGT plus Q, BLT sandwich people, is that we are actually integral to the vitality and health of society, to really change that conversation we're having with ourselves, that we should just have gay marriage and be tolerated and find out. No, you need us. There's something very dynamic, because queer people have been celebrated for thousands of years, as we know, as we're discovering archaeological sites, anthropological situations, Peruvian erotic, there's just a number, and I'm not really going to go into that. That's some other discussion. But I wanted to, when I was looking around that day in San Francisco, I was like, well, what is drag? Okay, it's, right now it's less of RuPaul conversation, but it's shape-shifting. And I used to go to these clubs, years ago, certainly we were talking, or I was discussing the celebrated Tranny Shack in San Francisco, probably 20 some years ago. It's the underworld, it's the cabaret. So you get this shape-shifting, you get this Heyoka trickster sacred clown celebration to the audience, some sort of laughter healing. So when I started looking at this, I said, well, what I began to understand within myself is, I said, we have no stories, we have no frame stories, we have no guided mythology. And a mythology is sort of a collection of rites of passage, you might say. Like, how do you grow up, feeling open about your gender assignment? Because I had a friend of mine, here's a question, I'm diverting, this is free association, but I had a friend of mine said, I don't understand this gender fluidity and gender beyond. I said, well, let me just give you my perspective. I said, because you have a penis or a vagina, it doesn't mean you have to act a certain way attached to your genitalia. And then she was like, oh, okay. So if I have a penis, do I have to walk around in a suit and tie in Wall Street? Do I have to play football? Or can I wear my mother's high heels and not try to get gender reassignment, but just say, okay, I have a penis, but I'm not feeling this beat myself up masculinity sort of thing. So in conversation tonight is my beautiful, beautiful brother, ally, Perry. And our attempt tonight is to talk about, storytelling and its various formats, and certainly, how we're going to invite you, all of us, to do better. Certainly, I was talking to one of the people here that things like Grindr and all these things are actually emphasizing ageism, emphasizing stigma, emphasizing racism. I mean, they've changed that a little bit, and I met the owner of Grindr. Don't say, I'm Latino oriented, or I'm into black men, or I'm into white men, or I'm into, whatever. It's just open it up. I'm open to whomever passes by. So with that said, Perry, you had your intro. This is like, I'm personally walking these books out for the first time. So this is my second event with them. The prior one was the Lambda. But one of the things I want to touch on is, so the way I started to walk this out, is in 2001. After looking at gay pride and all these different things, I started to question myself and who was I as a faggot, and who was I as an artist, as a commodity, as an objectified capitalist product. And so I decided to do something, and my first installation, which was in the Castro in San Francisco, that was called Homoeroticism and the Sacred, because I wanted, first of all, to de-objectify art, that it was just this thing to be purchased and owned as an artist, as opposed to something living and animating that you're bringing into your house. And I centered it around, I wanted to better understand myself as a male, and the male ego, centered around patriarchy. So I did the installation Homoeroticism and the Sacred, and with a performance art piece called The Death of the Male Ego. This was spurred by, how many of you have heard of the book Castell's Encyclopedia of Queer Myth, Symbol and Spirit? Have you had it in here? No. It's a phenomenal book. Changed my life. It's an encyclopedia, and it basically goes through all these metaphoric, from food to all these religions, different movements, but it's spoken or revealed to its reader as an encyclopedia. So you can look something up, like, for example, lettuce. Lettuce is a homoerotic food. And at my installation, I had, homoerotic foods and different things like that. But it was opening me up to, homoeroticism is everywhere and in everyone. And then we're taught and institutionalized to behave certain patterns and religions and different things.
I thought, this is like part of the world that Willow is creating in these books, this rich world of the imagination that doesn't take place in what is our regular world now, in which basically a lot of decisions are made by American Express. So I really wanted to bring this up.
Thank you. And emerging from that, just to give you kind of a very brief summary, the books, it's 5 books. It's a series of books, and it's at some point going to be turned into a play, I hope, a 5-act play. So these books follow an initiate fall from innocence, meeting teachers, rites of passage, this sort of thing. So one thing, I'm just going to give you a little thing. It's a story of a Jaguar magician, which is a queer being who is a master of subtle energies and becoming this. And the being is named Lola. And I'll have some slides up here quickly that we'll go through. But at the conception of Lola, which is called in because there's some danger on the planet of great consciousness, which is Earth. Okay, we'll talk about that in a second. And he's called forth to, first of all, they recognize that there's some in disequilibrium with the maleness aspect on the planet. So they give this being a penis. It's not like, I want these books to be, directed towards male or female, but there's a specific plot story. Okay, this being is going to liberate masculinity in some level. And the first thing he does is he's being taught in the first 3 books by various teachers, and to reacquaint this innocent being to the magic of being gay. And we'll talk about that a little bit, about why we are feared is because of our magic. And I've even tried to get things published in Huffington Post, and the minute you mention queers and magic, no, we're just not going to do it. And I'm like, whoa, you'll do it with Harry Potter and bisexuality and Dumbledore and okay. So he emerges, but the interesting thing is I chose to move beyond just having a creation myth and give it the 5th act, which is the redemption, about, well, what can queers possibly bring? And I use queers as encompassing everything that is beyond heterosexual gender. So, if you need a specific label, that's okay. That we were the walkers of the in-betweens between masks, between genders, that would lead humanity or encourage humanity to move beyond dualistic thinking and existence. So henceforth, this is a little new agey, but into 5D consciousness. Okay, so that's the books. Perry yesterday was talking to me a little bit about, explaining the style, because it is unusual, and, I've been working with people to understand it. Well, the books were created first with imagery, with illustrations, which is a very backwards way to write, but it's an interesting way to write. My background is in advertising and marketing, so I understand how intense imagery is. I mean, I look at words as they've been so bastardized, it's really hard to read metaphor these days. I mean, you look at the Bible, which is thrown backwards in society, and it's a book of poetry in Aramaic, and they're trying to literalize it. So the books play on the right brain first. Okay, so they reach out to the creative mind with their imagery, and then they speak to the left brain, which is pulling in the language and the glyphs that way through words. So it's told as, a lot of people don't understand this, but as a bardic tale. So a bardic tale is spoken word. That's where you would sit around a fire and you would tell stories. So I mentioned to Perry yesterday, I said the way these stories work, I think, is to be read aloud. And which, people don't do that. I think it's becoming a new thing. I've seen it in different social medias that people are starting to read aloud. You talked about style yesterday. You talked about Furbank, and I also mentioned my relationship with William Blake and how these works respond, and then we'll start the visuals.
Yeah. Well, that's when I first started reading Willow's books, the density of the language really got to me. I thought, wow, this reminded me of a gay author named Ronald Furbank. Lots and lots of people have no idea who Ronald Furbank is now, but he was one of the most influential queer authors of the 20th century. Like, I don't know how many other writers really picked up on him, like Harold Pinter was a big Furbank fan. A lot of other people, they're kind of escaping me at this point. But what Furbank did was, Furbank was kind of crazy about the external world because the interior world was too scary for him. The interior world was the world of queer desire. And so you couldn't publish things about queer desire in those days. Furbank died in 1928. But you could write about style. So most of what we call camp comes from Ronald Furbank. I mean, he was the master of camp. And so I thought about just, a little passage from Furbank, which gives you this intense language that Willow uses in his books, and also a complete stream of consciousness. And this is also what I felt about Willow's books, was that everything is in a stream of consciousness. It's like it just comes directly out of your brain. There's no filter between the brain